Many of you may know him, but for those who don't, Jim has a distinguished career with National Geographic. He was on the staff of National Geographic between 1962 to 1994. And he contributed over 2,000 photographs to various issues.
So that they published too. They actually put them on paper.
Yes. So he contributed thousands more.
Thousands more.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I actually was recently. This is him now. Oh.
No, I keep getting your message.
Yes. So Jim grew up in Pittsburgh and studied under several distinguished photographers like Harry Callaghan and Aaron Siskin.
Right.
Later on, he worked in Pittsburgh Photo Library under Roy Stryker, who was a farm.
It's very interesting because it has a direct bearing on this. He ran the Farm Security Administration under Roosevelt. He ran their historical section, and he was an economist and a historian, and he felt it was very important to record what was going on during the time of the Depression. So the pictures that we all have in our head are from the photographs that were made for Roy Stryker by some of the well-known photographers. I mean, we photographers know them, you may not, of the time. And that's, I think, the genesis for what we've done here.
That's right. So, without further ado, I will let Jim talk about the process, how this exhibit came about. But we spent many, many hours together roaming through and reviewing many photographs which I see or don't see, or sometimes you have to have a reason why you open certain box, because they are sometimes photographs, great photographs among many which are not that interesting on the surface. And just last thing, Jim's artistic eye allowed me to really see beyond what I have to see as archivist, as document, photograph as document, and he was able to pull from these thousands and thousands of photographs. Maybe we look at a few hundred, but thousands are here. There's many more, other options which we can explore to see photographs which really have variety of artistic qualities. And last thing is that we picked these pictures, and I did research a little later. So they were picked because you like them. We didn't even know the stories of most of them behind, and later on we'll explain it. So
Ava was able to discover some of the stories behind, which are all very, very interesting indeed. I chose these pictures with Ava based primarily on three things, I suppose. Their merits in terms of subject. Were they representative of Middlebury? Were they technically acceptable, rational, reasonable? And thirdly, for an exhibit, you want, most importantly, did they have dramatic impact? Were they strong pictures, like the one particularly that I want to talk about of the soldier from the Union Army? So that was the process that we went through here in the basement down the stairs over here, and then we would take the prints or the small case photographs up to my studio at 27 Washington Street. You'll see a picture of it upstairs. I couldn't resist. It's my house, it's our house, but I think you'll all recognize it. And it's a wonderful photograph. And we take them up to the studio, put them on an Epson 700, 750 scanner, which is a fairly top of the line scanner, and make a digital rendition of that image, and then I would clean up the image, take the dust and specks and dots and damage off it, except for with these case photographs, which I only cleaned up the part around the people's faces. You'll see there's lots of dust. Well, this is a good example here. You can see it from where you're sitting, I think, can't you? Hi, John. How are you? Thank you for coming. All the way from Brandon. And Pat's here. Good. George. Everybody. Everybody. It's great to see everybody. So anyway, so I cleaned up around her face. But I didn't clean up all around the outside because these pictures are very old and they deserve to have some of their character remaining. But I wanted in the pictures that you particularly see upstairs and in the black and white pictures here to show what the image looked like when it was presented to the viewer back in 1888 or 1902. Yeah.
Quick question, when you say clean up, what are you actually doing to
I was digitally removing scratches and dust spots. And you can do that by what's called, you clone the picture that's near, you clone the pixel that is near to the pixels that are messed up. And you can, it'll boom, boom, just like that, and it changes it. It's quite wonderful.
And also, because historical photographs are often not that interesting, they are not really printed for artistic viewing. And we have some, for example, here, original photographs, and you can see the image of the portrait of Jessica Swift and the original picture in the case. But some of these pictures were not were damaged by time. These were utilitarian, basically pictures held by families for many decades. So that's where Jim made some decisions sometimes to enhance it.
We just simply we call it. It's a process that's perfectly legitimate, and I thought it was particularly legitimate in historic context. And so that you should know that I restored these pictures the way they would have been when they were shown to Mrs. Swift the first time. Not in the size that they're at. I blew them up so that we could all see them easily without difficulty. And particularly the case photographs. Let's get started on those. I want to spend about 20 minutes down here and then about 20 minutes upstairs. You may be wondering what this picture is here. It's a picture for Bill Hart that I took a long time ago, August 28th, 1963. It doesn't have any spots on it, I can guarantee you. It's wonderful. That was at the I Have a Dream speech at the Lincoln Memorial. And this is for Bill. We want to read them here.
I will put it.
And these are the two books. These are two books by my colleague and good friend Charlie Cobb on the road to freedom. And I commend him. He's done a city-by-city tour of what was going on in the struggle for civil rights. So they're all both interesting books. Let me put them over here. Let's start just off the hand. You've had a chance to be down here and look at the pictures beforehand, right? More or less. Our town. This is our town. And the remarkable thing is this is from 1900, and you get a sense of the geography, you get a sense of the changes in the landscape. Chipman Hill doesn't have any, it's not wooded. It's still pasture. It doesn't have any houses on it up the hill. The basin, the tow block is just being built. There are a lot of things that people who really know this town come in and say, oh wow, look at that. That's the way it was when my You know, when my father took me around, you have to be pretty old to do that. But anyway, and then on the other side, things have not changed. So it's I think it's a wonderful picture. And in this town lies downstairs this wonderful archive of, what, 30,000 pictures, more or less?
More or less.
That start back in 1845.
More or less.
More or less. Photography was invented in 1839 by William Fox Talbot in England and Daguerre in France. And the two men had entirely opposite as you can get, methods for making a photograph. One, Talbot's used a negative process that was able to make something called a calotype. And a calotype, I will read from the history of photography, if I may, is, just to get it right, there's the back one here. So a calotype, which is not these down here, these are daguerreotypes.
Daguerreotypes, ambrotypes, and tintypes.
And tintypes.
Yes.
But the pictures that are in black and white that are bigger is the system which we have continued on from 1839. Daguerreotypes have faded away. Unless you're a specialist, you don't make a daguerreotype. And a calotype is produced on an image on paper. It's monochromatic, it's laterally reversed, it's a negative, but in contact with another photo paper, it makes a positive, and you can make them over and over and over and over again. And that's the secret of the success of photography. He did this in February of 1839, and he was joined by, on the other side of the channel, by Louis Daguerre, and he invented the daguerreotype, which produces a unique, unduplicatable image that is laterally reversed, monochromatic, but on metal. And metal is not transparent or translucent in any way, and therefore you can't copy it, except by making a photograph of it. And that's what we did with these.
And if I can
Yes.
interject. During my research, I discovered that first itinerant photographers were in town here in 1843. So basically 4 years after this big discovery in France, we already had photographers here, and we know that one of the double portrait of ministers from Reverend Thomas Merrill and Hoville are from around this time. We don't know exactly, so that's why Jim says 45.
Yeah.
We don't want to push it too far, but we know that they were already this type of pictures made here in Middlebury.
And daguerreotypes were very popular, and they became even more popular when tintypes were invented. They were literally on a piece of tin. The daguerreotype is on a silver-coated
copper plate.
So much more complicated, much fancier, and gave very, very fine results. The tintype is not bad. But let's get to the big picture, which is the fact that we were able, back in those days, to record exactly what people look like beyond the painting. I have a painting of my great-grandfather that was done at the same time in 1840, and I think it's very good, but it doesn't hold a candle to the veracity that you get in a photograph, in my view. That's why I'm a photographer, I suppose, instead of a painter. And you only have to look at this picture of this young man who is clearly going to the Civil War or has been in the Civil War. This was made in 1862. We don't know who it is, do we?
No, we don't know.
And I think it's extremely strong. I think it shows the uncertainty that he is facing for his future, and whether he's going or he's come back and has been injured, for example, and has got to figure out a way to live. Who knows? But the look in his eyes is, I think, very telling. If I was an editor of a historical magazine, I'd put this picture on the cover of my magazine. What kind of cameras do we use for that kind of, in that era? Yeah. Happily, we're all old enough to remember them. I don't have to explain film cameras to you all. So you see, they very fortunately they've got several copies, several kinds of cameras out. I did start with I started with a Rolleiflex and then a Leica, and have moved on now to the digital cameras. The Nikon D850 is the current one I have. I basically only have one camera at a time because I only have one set of eyes. I would have backup cameras, and when I was working at the Geographic, I'd carry 3 other backup cameras in case something bad happened, which happily nothing ever did. I always came back with the camera. We had guys. There are all kinds of stories, but it's like all afternoon. What I don't know anything about is this. And if somebody here can figure that out, we'll all be very much more wise.
Yes, this is actually our earliest example from our collection, and we know that it's a homemade camera, so there was someone here who really was very clever. When it looks not that interesting on first sight, but it's actually very well done, and it was for glass plate negatives. It has these chambers here. It was a very difficult chemically and complicated chemical process to be able to produce photographs, but people clearly were very much devoted to this process, and so this contraption is here, and I hope that someone will tell me more about it. I asked actually a few photographers, and nobody can, I have some ideas but don't know exactly. And several other cameras here, they are from different periods, including this little one here from 1915, which Ansel Adams began to photograph with this particular camera. So
they didn't make very good pictures with it, though. They made terrible pictures.
So please take a look.
Anyway, why don't we take our chairs and go upstairs, and we'll talk more about the pictures on the second floor, which are all, none of them are daguerreotypes. I just want to also mention the picture of Jessica Swift. We know from this picture, and the fact that there are several others, that she was perhaps quite vain, and she was also quite beautiful, and she lived a very long time,
110. And she is the most photographed woman of Middlebury, so please note this. And here we have also in this case all original case photographs which are reproduced above, so you
the
are
thing
welcome.
the thing that you see blown up, enlarged, are the ones that are also in the case over here. But this is what I mean. Look at the quality of the lace. That's not done on a machine, everybody. That's done by hand, and there's a lot of it. Look at the sort of royal character to her pose. I think it's just a wonderful photograph. And it was a pleasure that it enlarged.
What year is it?
This is, what?
I don't.
This is about 1890s, where she was in Northampton studying
That's right,
music.
that's right.
So it's not by local photographer. Most of these photographs here are most likely, and in some cases is documented by local photographers, but she traveled all over the world, and most of these photographs are Dresden, London, Paris. This was a woman, very worldly woman, who still resided here and really cherished our town and history. However, she was well traveled and photographed.
Yeah, well traveled, well photographed.
And this dress actually is dress of her mother, this beautiful
Oh my God,
lace.
really?
So,
I didn't know
yes,
how much it was.
so really absolutely beautiful lace. And upstairs we have several other clothing, pieces of clothing. So please notice, it's all from our collection. We have wonderful things here.
Her mother was at the Tell. Her mother was at the Tell.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
So I think maybe we should go upstairs. We're getting about halfway through here. Anyway, this picture, right, looks like yesterday's newspaper, right?
Yeah.
It is yesterday's newspaper, more or less. Anyway, it was it's USA Today's Life, Sunday, May 6, 2018. But the original picture was shot over here.
January 4th.
On January 4th, 1929. It's when the Patel block burned.
No.
Is it the Patel block?
No, it's Rogers block.
Rogers block, it's another
Right
block,
here.
sorry about that.
Yes. There are many fires here.
Yeah. We had a lot of fires. I grew up in Pittsburgh, and I worked for WIIC television in the 50s. And I was the guy I was the youngest film photographer, and I was always on call for any fires. We had more fires that year than you could possibly imagine. I went out one time in the middle of the winter, and I was standing there waiting for a wall to fall over because there were big fires too. And it was cold. It was really cold. I was sitting there shivering, holding my camera like this, waiting for the action, because you could see that it was going to fall over, right? Sure enough, the wall fell over. I held the camera steady. We got the wall coming down, flames, smoke, everything, you know, and it was over with, and the fire behind me started to get a little bit worse. And I went, I better go. And I went to pick up my feet, and I couldn't because they were frozen to the ground. That's what you call dedication. That's what we do. Anyway, no more case photographs. Isn't that a surprise? It's all gone by the way of the dodo. And the calotype, the negative process has come to take its place, and will not be replaced until we have two things: these things and these things. This is, what did I say, 3 terabytes? Yeah, 3 terabytes on here of memory. So you hook these two things together, you can go around the world taking pictures for the National Geographic. They don't yet, but they will very shortly, because the cameras are extremely good. This is the iPhone 7 Plus, and it makes remarkably clear photographs. It's wonderful, and correctly exposed photographs. So let us start with more or less the kind of the world of black and white, analog, negative to positive image making that went on primarily after, say, 1870, I suppose. Is that right? Would you think that would be a good general distribution point or departure point? Photography really came into its own in the United States of America with the work of Matthew Brady and Francis Gardner, Louis Sullivan, a variety of other, T.H.O. Sullivan, and a variety of other early pioneers who were pressed into service during the Civil War. And I think we've probably all seen pictures from that era as well, and they show in graphic detail the horror of war, the terror of war. And I think there's one picture of Savannah, Georgia that sticks in my mind to the research that I did for another project. And it is just the silhouettes of the downtown Savannah which was made of brick, and just these jagged, it looks exactly like Aleppo in Syria. Same picture, same tragedy, same death and destruction, you know. And recorded by a very early camera equipment. Anyway, cameras were working there, but they're also working up in Middlebury, Vermont. And I'm very proud of this picture in the corner. I suggest you look at it because the photographer did the right thing. This is a picture of 27 Washington Street, which if you give people the directions, if you go out of the co-op area, that's where the co-op is, and turn left, you're headed out of town on Washington Street and Washington Street Extension to Hunger Street and points north, and points that are very exciting all the rest of the world. And we're just in the next block from the co-op. That's where 27 Washington Street is. Come by if you like. Have a look at the gardens, and if you see a car in the driveway or probably home, come up and ring the bell, and we'll show you the garden. We'll show you the house. It's a house that we bought in 1992, and we're the fourth owner. But anyway, that's for me as a property owner, but for me as a photographer, on my other hat. And what's great about this picture is it's shot straight into the sunshine, straight into the afternoon sun. And the photographer, I think he's standing on a wagon. Well, he's standing on something tall because he's elevated. Don't you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah. Eric, you agree? Yeah. And he's shooting straight, and he gets the exposure dead on the money, because he's got the house is white, and white comes out, the dark shutters come out, and the exposure very nice. But it's you know, everybody told you to have the sun over the back shoulder, right? Well, you know, this guy said, nah, yeah, I like it this way. I'm going to take it this way. It's a wide-angle lens, quite a wide-angle lens, and so it gets all the greenery, and quite frankly, the house still looks a lot like that. I could bring one up on my cell phone, and perhaps I will afterwards. You can see that it's similar. We have a slightly different fence, but there's a fence there as well.
What year was this?
That picture was made in 1888, yes. 1888.
That's the Cushman's house.
Yes.
That was, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
So, where are we geographically? We are in Lake Champlain, the area of Lake Champlain. I came to Vermont knowing I would be interested in settling here because of two reasons. One, the mountains, the Green Mountains, were on the east, and Lake Champlain was on the west. I thought, what a perfect relationship of geography that would make for a very interesting and wonderful place to live. We also had a very good friend, and have a very good friend, Jason Bacon, and his wife Nina, and that's why I was not here on time, who invited us to come and stay, and we stayed on the 4th of July. We came in on the 3rd, and the 4th of July, they live up in New Haven, and on the 4th of July, we went to the Bristol Parade. What else would you do? Pat and I were so enamored of the Bristol Parade that night, after a good deal of wine, we said, we would like to buy a house in Middlebury. And Jason suggested that this was a good town to be in, and the college was here, and this and that. So Wedge Murdoch, does anybody know Wedge Murdoch?
Yes.
You all know Wedge Murdoch. Wedge took us under his arm, under his wing, and he was big enough to carry both of us, and brought us to 27 Washington Street. And we stood on the corner right there by the driveway, as looked at him, looked at the house a couple of times, turned around and said to him, "Sold." And we were very happy to do so. So anyway, here we are on Lake Champlain. And this was made with an aerial camera that is an old Fairchild, an F8, that they use with great big film, 8 by 10 inch film on a roll. So it would be 8 inches wide and would have maybe 20 feet of film rolled up inside it. And you could advance the shutter and stand there and make pictures. There was no need to change the focus because the pictures were always at infinity. So it's a fixed focus camera and used to great advantage. And you look closely at this picture, you'll see it is really quite exact and sharp. A lot of information in it. I showed you the picture of the fire. Let me get on to we divided the rest of the row into kind of 2 walls. One working class Middlebury, and the people who live here and work here, and that includes the marble works in use. The guys are all standing still because it's a very long time exposure. The film was very slow, and then the kids standing outside their schoolroom, and it gives you an idea as to what a schoolroom, students, how they dressed, and even how they felt. Maybe it was just a cloudy day, maybe they'd all had a tough test, but I think it's stronger than that. I think it's quite a handsome photograph from the 1890s. The third picture over here is of the ladies who lunched, the ladies who worked during lunch at the old hotel that was
Red Loaf Inn, owned by Joseph Patel.
It's called the Red Loaf Inn. And these were very popular in the 1890s and early in the century, I suppose. I guess until electricity came in, and then there were too many fires, and I guess they fell out of popularity. Guys on the steps, I assume they're Middlebury residents. It's a rather long time ago, so I don't think anybody's come up with a name, right?
They are names, actually.
They are names.
On the reverse of these photographs,
good.
we have names.
Oh, they are below.
But I don't know who
So
they
if
are.
anybody sees their relative there, let Ava know, because she'll be interested in knowing more about it.
And actually, that's what happened with Middlebury College baseball team, which we have here a huge collection of Middlebury College photographs, because Middlebury College didn't really collect until not long time ago. And someone came and spotted, I think, his grandfather and purchased these pictures. So that was the story behind it.
So, yeah, so someone's actually has bought that
Yes,
that picture.
yes, a
right?
relative.
Right? Oh,
Fair
terrific.
enough.
That's fair enough. So yeah, and if you see any relatives here, by all means, let Ava know. So we get now more into the ability to, the camera is secure and photographers know what they're doing. They're making pictures of multitudes of people, and I wanted to include as many people in this one set here as I could, so that there would be, you'd have a sense of what the citizens of Middlebury looked like in the 1890s to 1910, 1915. Over here was the exclusive wall, and exclusive, very exclusive. Another aerial photograph showing the name of the
Grosse Point.
Grosse Point. Yeah, there's a Grosse Point, Michigan, right? I think it's probably, I don't know.
Yes, there is, and actually there is a story behind it, because
Yeah.
second husband of Jessica Swift bought, after they got married, they purchased this beautiful property, and he named it after Grosse Pointe, Michigan.
Michigan.
So that's why the same name.
And did they have property in Michigan as well?
That was his property, his family belonged to
family,
him,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
Charles Swift.
So this comes with all the naming, the whole business of naming your summer place out of either, old family estate in Scotland or your family estate in Grosse Pointe, Michigan. And it's quite a house. I've not been up to it. I've seen it from the lake, but it's quite remarkable. Has anybody actually been there?
I know where it is, but.
Yeah.
Isn't there like a golf course there?
And then the golf
I
course.
think they have like 5 or 6 holes or something like that in this property.
Have you been on the ground?
Eric and I fish. We fish, we go right by that.
Oh,
I think it was purchased a few years ago for some huge amount of money because it's a very sort of valuable property. But we have all these albums from the 1920s which document the activities there, and this picture actually came from this album.
And so, exactly, and so I wanted to talk about the pictures that are here. This house is made of stone. I mean, it's a real mansion, and the view is quite incredible. It's next to Kingsland Bay, which is slightly, sort of halfway up the picture, where we actually have an anchorage for our little boat. And there's another house back in there in the end that's also very fancy, and been fixed up, and these been sold off and on, and then somebody comes along and fixes it up even more. I don't know what Grosse Pointe is like now, but anyway, so that's the setting on Lake Champlain. Beautiful views of the sunrise and the sunset and all the rest of it. Good place to run your speedboat, which I saw this picture and I thought, wow, that's really incredible. If you count the cylinders on here, I don't know whether they're one on each side or not, or it's just an inline engine, but it's a very large engine, and it must be going quite fast. And this attests to the fact that by the time this was taken in 1923, we had shutters in photography that could go off quickly. Probably this was made, what do you think, Eric, about 500th of a second, perhaps? Probably, something like that.
Faster film too.
And the film was faster. So there was progress made, and progress to the point where you could make snapshots. And in the album here, which I think is really wonderful, I think on a different page is this photograph that shows Mary Werner Fletcher, who was going to be Mrs. Arthur Healy, having a good time on the grassy slope at Grosse Pointe. And I think, and this speaks in me to also to time. And there's this time that the shutter is open. This is what Henri Cartier-Bresson called the decisive moment. The photographer clicked the shutter just at the right moment. Just at the right moment. It's just a terrific picture. Look at it closely if you haven't seen it. It's a lot of fun. And that leads us on to clearly other activities that were going on in Grosse Pointe, namely golf in 1923. And lastly, I wanted to show some of the magnificent portraits that were made by local photographers here of these people. Here again, also to welcome the sons of Albert Fletcher, who's up here, and Fletcher himself, very distinguished. And over here, this is Fletcher as well.
Actually, I would like to interject something.
Yeah.
By coincidence, as I mentioned that Jim picked these photographs, but we really didn't know interrelationship between them sometimes, and only later, as it turned out. This is the father, who is pictured here as a young man. This is one of their daughters, and this is the son, and both of these children passed away early and tragically. He was a West Point cadet who died at 25, and she died hit by a car. So this is the first wife of Alan Keeley, who was a professor of art history here and also president of the board and person who contributed large.
Right, yeah, sure. And so tragedy is not visited just on the poor. But it gives you a sense, I think, of there's a certain level of formality with these pictures. I think there was sort of formality in that age as well. Even guys who were working on the road were wearing coats and ties, and this really shows the golden age really up here in little old ancient remote Vermont. I think the picture of the speedboat is really quite remarkable. And the last pictures that I'd like to talk about are these on the wall over here. Just for the sheer beauty of a photographer's eye. This is the one I like here. The combination of positive and negative space and the sort of joy that he must have felt. He came across. I mean, when you're a photographer, you come around the corner and you say, "Oh my God, that's terrific! I'll take a picture of that," and you do. You don't pass stuff up. There have been some fairly serious moments when the car behind me was not too happy that I was screeching off, but I got the picture anyway. I hadn't hurt anybody. Once at sunset over the Vltava river in Prague in Czechoslovakia, I was riding a taxi, thank God, and suddenly the sunset was absolutely perfect. Garcelon Castle was just blowing up on the top of the hill, and there was a guy in a rowboat on the river down below, and I go, "Oh, it doesn't get any better than this." You know, stop the taxi, and I got out, and I ran across about 2 lanes of traffic, and sort of holding my hand up like this, and it was moving very slowly, and reached the edge of the bridge. Click, 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 and got a picture that made across 2 pages in the National Geographic magazine. Landscapes can be very serene looking, but they can take the breath out of you for some considerable time. And this picture is, you all have to have a quick look at that. This is an extraordinary figure in the left-hand side of the picture. And I don't know if it's recorded in the annals of Middlebury history, but I suspect, and maybe David you'll find out, maybe Eric knows, I don't know, that the gentleman on the left-hand side in the bowler hat is someone we've all seen pictures of, or maybe motion pictures of. So have a look at that one. And lastly, the stereo picture. Again, a very, I think, very handsome landscape photograph, and I'm partial to boats, so it had to be in the exhibit. I'd like to take questions from anybody who has any.
Why did you do a double print of that?
No, that's the way it is. That's the stereo pictures that come just like this. They're slightly offset, and there's a little viewer that you look through. We have one probably.
We have a few of them, yes.
And they were very popular. They gave you an image because of your eyes that was 3-dimensional. So that the boat,
viewer thing.
yeah, the little viewer. Remember that? Yeah. So that's why they're 2 together, but they're offset just a hair. There's like 12 degrees or something, I think. And it makes all the difference in the world. And this was a real discovery back in the 1890s, I think.
1880s, 90s, they were very popular. People traveled all over the world. There was a way of showing geography from all kinds of places. And this is done by local photographer, Barnes, and the one which Jim was showing, the beautiful Otter Creek landscape, is by Ruluf Dean, who was a photographer here in Millbury in the 1880s. And we were given a wonderful collection of his glass plate negatives, over 100 of them. And one of the pictures, yes, I will show you. One of the pictures is, if you are going to Town Hall Theatre, the interior of the audience, which is a famous picture. It was the only picture which existed of the interior, was done by him, and we have original negative of it.
Great,
so
great.
that's.
So,
Yes, David.
One very last photograph is the picture as you leave on the top of the stairs of the baby in the postman's bag. We also like to do amusing things, and I hope you'll get a kick out of it. It's a wonderful photograph. I think he's on a special delivery. Yeah, I'm sorry, you. David.
If you read what's written there underneath the picture, Mrs. Swift, that she was talking about her grandfather, Philip Patel. This is one of his favorite places. I had the rare opportunity to interview her before she died with Deborah Clifford, who some of you know. Deborah and I interviewed her, and I think it was in 1974. And by that time, she was well over 100. And she talked about her father, John Stewart, who was a well-known politician in Vermont in the late 19th century. That he used to skate down Otter Creek in the 1840s. She's talking about the 1840s. And Deborah and I keep looking at each other. This is so amazing. You talk to someone who can talk about it. And then she started talking about the war. And we couldn't figure out which war it was. Finally, she mentioned that it was the Spanish-American War that she was talking about. I mean, she was quite a lady.
I'll bet. You can see she had a very full life. And you can see it because you see photographs.
And another photograph portrait which I would like to draw your attention to. Downstairs there is a portrait of a young boy, and we also, Jim picked it up from a little carte de visite. We didn't know who this person was. It turned out that it was Jessica Swift's twin brother who died at age 9. So and it's coincidentally all these tragedies and joys and are showing and through these pictures.
I think the museum can say it has a fuller understanding of the history of Middlebury now after this exhibit, and can go forward. We hope with an increased amount of investigation of the photographs and the other artifacts. They can all go together in the future. Really do.
With digital technology, especially if we can really transfer, kind of invest in it, and really that will help to bring the richness of this collection. Otherwise, everything is really hidden in the storage, well protected, but it's very hard to convey what we have to people who live in town and are often not familiar. So I invite you to come, and I'd be happy to show anything you like. So, and thank you to Jim for this wonderful contribution.
You're very welcome, and I appreciate having had an opportunity to look into the pictures. It's a great treasure trove, is what it is. Yeah, sure.
Jim, at the risk of interrupting
No.
your train of thought, who is the guy in the bowler hat? It is not Charlie Chaplin, is it?
What's the year of that?
I will look. I don't know, what's it say?
I think this one, it's estimated 1890, and I wish...
No, it's not Charlie Chaplin.
It's not Charlie.
Well,
It's not Laurel.
Of course it's not Charlie Chaplin. It looks like Charlie
It
Chaplin.
does.
It's going in 3 feet of snow, only God knows. It's recorded forever on the piece of film. I thought we'd all get a kick out of it. It really looks, I mean, look at it. This, I don't know, there's something by the way he's
the
standing
date
here.
is estimated, David.
So, anyway, any other questions? Any comments? Yes, sir.
This is a little off the subject, but I was watching one of Willem Lang's half-hour nature shows, and he was interviewing a photographer from the Adirondacks. And the photographs had been put in a book for sale. However, every single shot had been photoshopped in the lab. So my question is, what's your opinion of presenting to the public images that are not true?
I feel very strongly about that. I really do. I mean, I think that Photoshop is a wonderful tool, but it has to be used by responsible, intelligent, and honest people, both photographers and editors and technicians. At the Geographic, I can tell you what the rule is. The rule is we do not use Photoshop. We do not use Photoshop. The pictures go in the magazine with only corrections for color, temperature, and but we don't take out telephone wires or pieces of trash on the street or people's heads or, God forbid, put one person's head on top of another person's head. I was in Bulgaria in 1959 and with the guy from the U.S. Embassy, and he says to me, he says, I'm staying with him, he says, you're a stupid and expendable kid. Would you please go down to the Soviet Embassy and take a picture of the picture on the wall of the Politburos waving hello to everybody on May Day? I said, I was staying with them and eating their food, sleeping in their bed. And they said to me, yeah, well, I guess so, sure. He didn't say that I was a stupid, and that's what he meant. You're the one that is expendable. I'm not going to send an officer down there. So I trudged down there with my Leica, and sure enough, there's a big picture, maybe 8 by 10, of the Politburo all standing there. And there's one picture I looked more closely at it, where there's clear. Some scissors have been used. And somebody has scissored out one person and pasted in another person. And it was all perfectly clear. And that's why they wanted the photograph. Because they wanted to know who that new person was. Not that they cared either one way or the other, just wanted to know who had been replaced. It stuck with me, particularly now that Photoshop is, I mean, and I have on my, as George knows, I have I'm sitting on my computer monitor at the top, a little statue that I got when we were in Berlin a couple of years ago. It's a statue of Pinocchio. Make sure that I don't roll my nose. It keeps me on the straight and narrow. I do use Photoshop now. I'm retired. I'm not getting published, and I use it for the pictures that you've seen at the Edgewater Gallery over on a couple of occasions. Yeah, Janet.
Oh, no, sorry.
Anyway, if no other questions, just say thank you very, very much for coming. Thank you. Thank you a lot. If you haven't seen them up here, look closely at the photographs. We blew them up so that everybody could see clearly, but I think about 10 inches away is a good place to start. And it was a great place. I must say, it's Photoshop. You talk about Photoshop. This picture here, somebody, it was a fairly large picture, maybe 5 by 7 or so, but somebody had laid something wet on the top of the print. And so there was all kinds of lines and marks and like watermarks, right, on the print. I took those all out. Really, that's a heavy Photoshop job. And I think you can't tell that it was done. So that's an example where Photoshop, in my view, can be terrific if it's done responsibly.
Thank you all.
To look around.
Would you like to change